All right, back live with you tonight. You're in Focus, and thanks for staying on. And I'm with provincial candidates for Gauteng. This is the provincial and national elections. Only, 2 months away now. South Africans are expressing their frustration of the high levels of crime, load shedding, water outages in Gauteng and elsewhere in the country, stagnant economies, unemployment, the cost of living and the lack of housing. But analysts and politicians alike agree that the voting battleground will be in Gauteng, with all the major parties eyeing a victory. And right now, we have Gauteng Premier candidate Solly Msimanga of the Democratic Alliance, ActionSA's Funzi Ngobeni, Thapelo of Jama-ah, and Margaret Arnold of the African Independent Congress. A question for you tonight: are they presenting any solutions that are credible and that ring true with you, shall we say? 072-110-5584. Keep those messages coming, and if you've got any questions for the panel tonight, send them through on that very same number. Otherwise, drop us an X at Newzroom 405. Gentlemen and lady, good evening. Good to have you, and thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you so much.
It's been a long time coming. We've been wanting to have this premier debate, maybe an even longer one, and it would have been great to have the ruling party with us. But be it as it may, you are supposed are the ones who are contending for the position. They are in the position. So you need to convince us why you need to be in that position. But maybe let's start here and get a broad view, right? The Auditor General says the financial health of the province remains viable, reflecting good discipline of effective budgeting and spending. 18 unqualified audit options with no findings, 14 unqualified with findings, and we'll touch on the areas of concern. If you look at irregular expenditure, is down from 7 billion to 5 billion. You look at fruitless expenditure, is down from 373 million to 105 million. Paints a picture of a province that's not doing too badly. Solly, let me start.
Go to hospitals and tell me if the province is not doing badly. Go to clinics, go to police stations, and tell me if this is not a limping province administratively. We have 143 police stations. Almost half of them at this point in time are on the brink of collapse. You're having hospitals that, if you look at some of the hospitals like Gauteng, and we can name them, these are hospitals that should be now declared as a health hazard or a risk. You're having schools. You go to Amanskraal, some of the schools now, there's still kids who are learning, in containers. And those containers, these are containers that were supposed to be temporary measures. They've been there for 10, 15 years. Kids now, you're sitting in a container, but your feet are on the ground. Yeah. These are some of the things that we have been saying this needs to be addressed. The police in the province, you're sitting with a 42% vacancy, and more than 50% when you come to special investigating unit, a vacancy that is there. That's why you're having, crimes that are not being able to be resolved. You're sitting now on average with police detectives that have on average each 160 or more cases an individual. Now, you tell me, all these clean audits, and the clean audits are mainly in not so, service delivery facing departments. And these are things that needs to be addressed. And this is why you're having more and more people saying this province is actually not in the good hands.
Yeah, I expected that you would raise those issues, because certainly also looking at areas with findings, those are the areas that I have findings. Health, certainly one of the areas. Social development, community safety, certainly there are findings there, and we'll delve in and find out exactly what those issues are. Margaret, unqualified with no findings, 18 areas of improvement, for example, in the Gauteng Department of Economic Development, in the Gauteng Education, in Dinokeng, in the Liquor Board, in the Cradle of Humankind, some good things.
Well, I think, unfortunately, I have to agree with Solly on my left-hand side here. I think if you come from areas where I come from in El Dorado Park and Westbury and other areas, we practically have to beg for police to assist us, and the crime is just going up, and it's not going down at all. Last week, there was a shooting in Westbury, where the lady could have survived and she did not survive, going to the hospital. Ambo took about 4 hours to come out, and yes, the hospital treatment was also pathetic. So I think, while unfortunately, we are not as fortunate as the DA to be part of the government on the province, but what we see on the grassroots level is definitely saying that we need better government, we need things to be improved. A few of the things that is mentioned, like for instance education and all those, yes, we don't have all those things working, so I can't understand if we are saying unqualified and qualified, and it just doesn't work for us. So I do have to agree that there needs to be a change of government anyway.
All right, Thapelo, you dabbed into local government a little bit, as Solly says, where the actual service delivery needs to be. But of course, you want to give it a try at provincial level. What is so bad at provincial level?
No, thank you so much, Dr. Mhluli. So I would like to concur with the notion that our health sector is not servicing our people, right? Not only the lack of the doctors and the HR, the human capital. There's also an issue here, the decaying infrastructure, where those hospitals can never be inhabited, right? They are also structurally condemned. So it's a serious issue where the government has to, in the province, we have to invest more on building more hospitals and also bringing in the human capital in those hospitals. So if you had listened to our manifesto as Jama-ah, in the Western Cape, we are already partnering with the private sector. We are doing the private public arrangement where we are, as Jama-ah, as the party, we've already brought in 10 clinics, 10 mobile clinics with the private sector that is passionate about transforming the status quo. So we are already doing it because it's a niche that we've identified, and that's where we want to strengthen our participation in servicing our residents, because we need to advocate for equal health care. So when you are more privileged, there's an issue here, your medical aid schemes, and there's an ordinary person out there who can't even afford a medical aid scheme.
All right. ActionSA, Dr. Funzi?
Yeah, look, I think firstly, Thabo, let's congratulate those that have received clean audits and all that. I think it's important that we must acknowledge that there are, good people in government. There are people that are doing their work, that are trying their best to ensure that, the finances of the province, of certain departments are in order. And these are people that we are going to work with when we get into government, because it's important to acknowledge that there are officials and then there are politicians. And there are people that are responsible for coming up with legislation, to implement that legislation, to do oversight. And those are the people that we are competing with. But we are not competing with officials that are in those offices. We want them to continue to do the good work, and we are going to be able to identify areas where they are lacking, and we're going to work with them to ensure that we improve. There are certain departments, as colleagues have already indicated, that are really failing. And I want to zoom into the Department of Infrastructure and also into the Department of Transport, because these are economic infrastructure that we need to ensure, including housing to a certain extent. And we have been going around the province, and we have noted a number of projects that have been left or abandoned by even contractors. Roads that have been abandoned by contractors who obviously were appointed on the basis that they do qualify. But if you actually look into all the details, you actually see that this was a contractor who was taking chances. And then you start asking yourself, what was in it for departments and even government that approved those type of contractors to be on site. So we have seen that. We have seen even with regards to housing. There are a number of mega projects that this government has tried to develop, most of them in the West Rand, and some of them have been left without a contractor on site for many, many months. Money have been lost in Montrose. You can go in Randfontein. You can go now to Tukom's race here in Randfontein as well. People are complaining that we have been waiting for houses and this mega project are not going anywhere, but money is being spent, you know. So those are problems that we currently have. And I'm mentioning those because for us to be able to get young people and all those who are unemployed into jobs, we need to make sure that our economic infrastructure is actually, you know, able to handle the economy and be able to handle businesses that are going up and down, trying to make ends meet so that they can be able to pay their employees. So if that infrastructure is not up to scratch, is not maintained, if we are trying to repay it, we can't repay it properly. If we are trying to rebuild it, we actually leave it, you know, in the middle of the construction period. That becomes a problem. We are losing money, we are losing time, more people get unemployed at that time. So it's important that we must be able to zoom into those ones, and when we get into government, we must be able to work towards fixing it.
All right, let's try and zoom in then. So let's go back to you. So the Department of Health, one of the biggest culprits when it comes to irregular expenditure, 2.2 billion rands, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, 15 million is what's been reported. But when I look closely into those books, they say that one of the biggest issues, for example, would be around medical supplies and oversight as far as the medical supplies is concerned. The other area of concern is the accruals that come because of the litigation matters. I think it's 4 billion.
We're sitting on 4 billion over 1,000 cases.
Yeah, over 1,000 cases that need to deal with. How do you plan to come in and sort that out?
Well, first of all, Tao, I think you need to then decentralize power from a national province to employing CEOs. You need to run your hospitals like a business. When you're running a business that you require certain components for your business to be successful, you always ensure that those are already there. It's a disgrace that you will not have life-saving surgeries taking place because you don't have linen and you're waiting for somebody at the provincial level to, to sign over procurement to pay a service provider for you to receive linen. I mean, it's a disgrace that you have that.
What the general says, part of the thing that they've done is that deviations because of things like that.
No.
That has amounted to, I think, over 1 million rands
It is because you've centralized power and people end up doing something out of desperation. That's why you end up having situations like you have. But if you were to then say, look, let's increase the limitation, because right now, CEOs at hospitals can go up to a certain level. Give them full control. Let's activate. Our IDs, Tao, as an example. You have an ID that is supposed to act as a smart card. Why do our old gogos have to go and stand on queues to be told that we can't find your file? Or we don't know what medication you're supposed to get come next week or come next month? Your ID should be able to then carry your file, your medical file, whatever the case may be, and whatever medication on the system. It's supposed to then say, this is when you last collected your medication. If you are on chronic medication, this is when you're supposed to then be coming in. That system is supposed to automatically then order your medication. The CEO who's sitting there, who's supposed to then be overseeing the maintenance of the infrastructure, because they are there on a daily basis. They
so
see what is
you are
actually
saying
happening.
The reason why something like that cannot be implemented is because procurement is so to speak, centralized at national.
It is centralized, number one. Number two, you're also having quite a lot of middle people that are there. Go to Tembisa Hospital. Hey, the hospital that is bought skinny jeans. The hospital that has bought, by the way, a wash rag, a face cloth for 200 rand a piece.
Yeah.
10,000 rand to buy a 20-liter bucket.
Yeah.
5,000 rand to buy a sofa that we can't even find.
Yeah.
And, somebody says, no, they were delivered to that hospital. And nobody's actually then being held to account for these kind of things. So I am saying, you then need to then say, this is the kind of hospital that you have. This is the size of the people that is actually then servicing. And then you then say, how much do then they need to then run this hospital in a proper manner? That money must be allocated. A CEO who will run that hospital like a business, functioning it like, making it sure that it functions like a business, will ensure that all these things are done on time, they're done every time they need to be done, and maintenance. the hospital in Johannesburg that was sitting without water for a very, very long time, as an example. You have a situation where people are now told, because of lack of maintenance within the hospital itself and outside of the hospital, cannot actually then ensure that people are given service. I mean, you can imagine your wife, your partner just giving birth, cannot even bath. You cannot even have water to then ensure that a child, is then, bathed in a proper way. I mean, that is something that... But,
Margaret, bring in here, I mean, what Solly is suggesting that, of course, decentralized power. Others can look at that and say that's why we have a situation in Tembisa where a hospital can order skinny jeans. Now, if you decentralize, you won't even have control over those issues. You have a situation, for example, in the Northwest, it's not here in Gauteng, but where they couldn't get incubators. They ended up putting babies on cardboard boxes. And when we follow up, why? It's because staff was frustrated at being able to get access to what was required. And so that bureaucracy would have been too long, and they needed to save lives. And that's what certainly they did. And the nurses had to take the rep and the fall for that. How do you balance that?
Thabo, I think we need to look at the situation in different dimensions. One, do we have the right people that are running our hospitals? You get to a hospital, and I think, Solly, you'd agree with me. You get to the hospital, the staff is frustrated, or the staff, some of them, do not even understand what they are doing. You get admin that doesn't understand their job description. You get nurses and you get doctors that is just super relaxed. And why are they that way? Because us as the politicians, we just don't care what we do. We do it the way we want to do it. So I have to say that you have to get the right people to do the right things. You have to get people that has passion to do what they are doing. I think all our government institutions, no one is passionate about what they are doing. No one is interested in what they are doing. You get there and they tell you, it's tea time. And I really believe that we need to get the right people to do what they have to do. It's the same thing within schools.
Right.
You get teachers that do not even want to be at school, and they are supposed to be teaching our kids. So I believe that we need to look at the right people and people that are fit to do what they have to do.
I want to take a break quickly, but I want to go back to you. You have not answered my question, and I'll bring back Funzi and Thapelo next. How are you going to deal with litigation? You've got people that are suing the state,
we can tell you what we need to do with it. We can tell you what we need to do with it. First of all, you need to, that's what I'm saying, you run hospitals and our clinics like you're running a business. You get rid of people that are incompetent. You need to hold people personally accountable. I met a lady in Tembisa whose sister died because her womb was taken out during birth, and she was sent home without even being properly closed up, and she died. And then now she's saying, who's going to raise this child now who was born, and 2 other children that the lady had. Now, these are things that you now need to then make follow-ups on. And then writing a letter from the department to just say sorry. It's just not going to cut it.
So what are you saying? Under the Democratic Alliance, you're going to hold the doctors responsible. You say you're a doctor, you're the one who must pay for this.
No. If there's medical negligence, we need to then do a thorough investigation as to what has happened. And you need to then say, if there was negligence and it can be proven that it is negligence that has taken place, then somebody needs to be held accountable. Mistakes do happen. Then we must accept. But then if there is general negligence that you're able to then see that, somebody was just being negligent here, then somebody has to be held accountable. But before we even start to say we need to hold people accountable, let's ensure that the same stuff that we are expecting so much out of, the morale is high, there's proper training that is taking place, but over and above that, there is the instruments that they need to do their job.
Let's take a break.
That is what is missing.
We'll come back and we'll get the ActionSA and Jama-ah to respond to that same question, how to do better in the Department of Health. You can weigh in tonight. Any of the solutions and suggestions being presented here, finding some kind of ground with you? Are they resonating with you? 072-110-5584. Drop us an X at Newzroom 405. We're back in a moment. Back live with you tonight, You're in Focus, and thank you very much for staying on. The premier candidates with me in the studio, Solly Msimanga, Margaret, Arnold, Funzi, Ngobeni, as well as Thapelo, Ahmed. And they're weighing in, of course, on a number of issues plaguing this particular province. You are also, Thapelo, looking at health as one of the issues that you will champion as Premier. A number of issues being raised, the issue of litigation, the issue of dilapidating infrastructure. I suppose the main reason the Auditor General says you are unable to fulfill all these things is because you've got these accruals and you've got some poor oversight. In one instance, she says the misstatements of figures is because it seems the accounting officers are not properly looking at the financial statements.
Yeah. Look, let's also zoom into the primary health care, because the province has the mandate to develop clinics within the communities, right? So where the hospitals are failing, this is where we need to also advocate for the 24 hours clinic that are operating within our spaces. Yeah. That is also crucially important, because you would know that the only projects that are being, or rather that are fairly new, it is the clinic projects. Our infrastructure in terms of the hospitals, it's decaying, and historically it has been there for quite some time. You would know that we can also look into other models. China has developed a technology where you would build a system within a short space of time. Yeah. And also you can even remove the clinic when you no longer need that particular clinic or the hospital. But the Premier
first said, tell you that, but I've come up with a plan to build 18 private hospitals, or at least some kind of hospitals in Gauteng in partnership with private sector.
Yes, it is important.
So he's laughing at this. He thinks it's absolutely bizarre.
It is also important to say, so the how part it's a fundamental here. Yeah. It's a fundamental question, right? So if there is an appetite from the private sector, that, because I've already cited that as Jama-ah, as a party, we are doing it. Yeah. Nonetheless, we are already doing it. It's not something that is on a pipeline. So if there is an appetite, so we will condone and commend to say, look, let us go towards that direction, because government alone is not sufficient. Remember, what fosters good governance, it is stakeholder engagement. You know, we need to also engage the stakeholders of the society, such as the private sector, the civil society, or NGOs that are in that health sector, including community residents, which are philanthropists who would say, I can commit to build a clinic, I can commit to build the hospital. There are people who have a lot of money that they do not know what to do with that particular money. So I think it is a commendable move if any one of us who's sitting here is going to pursue that route. And I can assure you that as Jama-ah, it's one of the routes that we are going to pursue moving forward after the 29th of May.
Funzi, who will fund exactly 18 private hospitals that will be bought? The Premier seems to think he can go to the market, he can raise the funds, but private sector must come on board, and certainly that will work.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem with this Premier, is coming up with all kinds of gimmicks and trying to impress us and the voters that he's actually doing something. Let's make an example, Thabo. There is an hospital that was donated to the province by a mining company during COVID. And that hospital was well functioning. They gave it to them, said, here's the hospital, use it. As we speak today, that hospital has been abandoned, it's dilapidated, has been taken over by Zama-zamas and so forth, you know. And they've spent close to about 500 million trying to renovate. And Pangeza says they are going to hold officials accountable. And it's now 2 or 3 years since that time, and no one has been held accountable. So the problem, fundamentally here, we are dealing with a lot of corruption. We are dealing here with a lot of incompetency. And for us, I think that's where we need to go in and fix. We want to ensure that we do a lifestyle audit, especially for a department like health that has been known to be the most corrupt in the province. You know, I think Babita must rest in peace, but this is the department that has cost her life as well. You know, so we need to do lifestyle audits. We need to do skills audit as well, and we need to fill vacancies that are vacant at the moment, so that we can and fill them with competent people. As the colleagues have already said, that the CEOs of hospitals must not be cadres that we are bringing in so that they can be able to fulfill our own agendas there. We must bring in doctors, and we must bring in people who are qualified to run hospitals, and as Solly says, run them like a business so that we can be able to avoid situations of a government being taken to court and being sued such big amounts. So to us, that's what we want to focus on. Let's have accountability. Those that have been found to be performing low in terms of their roles, they must actually be taken through performance assessment, and then must be flushed out, without any failure. And those that are being earmarked and being red flag for corruption, we want to see people being arrested and losing their jobs and staying in jail for a long time.
Here's a quick question for you. 07211055584. Thank you very much for your messages that are coming in. A question for Funzi on WhatsApp. It says, good evening. My question is to the incoming Premier of Gauteng, Funzi Ngobeni. Considering the corruption occurring in hospitals and health, how would ActionSA deal with corruption? Silo Mabelebele.
We are going to establish special courts that will deal with corruption, and so that we can be able to fast track, getting people into jail, and for many years, and that's exactly what we're going to do. But most importantly, we know that there is a problem with the NPA. We know that cases tends to be lost somewhere in the middle of the process. So we want to make sure that NPA get to be independent. Let's bring back the scorpions as quickly as possible so that we can be able to get this prosecution going through and make sure that NPA is independent. What we mean by NPA being independent, the fact that NPA reports to a certain department, a certain minister, it's a problem on itself. The fact that they have to go and request budget from that particular minister is a problem itself. We want NPA to report directly to Parliament.
So you want an independent NPA?
It must be fully independent so they can be able to execute their job.
All right. Let's talk about crime. I know you can tell me about the hospitals if you want to, but let's talk about crime. We have a great fellow, Elias Mawele. He just retired. He's a new one in Ngobeni that is coming. Seems to have been doing a good job in fighting crime in terms of Ugai Mulao and so forth.
My heart bleeds for Ngobeni and the others. Because when you engage with some of the senior officials in the South African Police Service, they're saying the morale is very low. They are saying there's political interference in operations of the police. They are saying you cannot operate from a centralized base at a national level. We now need to then decentralize so that police at a provincial level can be identified, can be employed, and can be trained, and can be deployed to areas.
Why do you think that idea is going to work in Gauteng?
No, let me tell you.
Where you govern in the Western Cape? You tried it.
No.
They've not given you that go. They are fighting it at national level. But they will fight it here in Gauteng as well, I'm sure.
But we've been calling for it to happen. There's no reason why you cannot have provinces, deciding the methodology or the system they want to implement at a provincial level. Gauteng crime will be different to what is happening in Limpopo, will be different to what is happening in the Northwest, will be different to what is happening in the Eastern Cape. When we get elected, there's 5 units I want to establish in Gauteng. I want to have a gang unit so that we can go into places like El Dorado Park, we can go into Rivoli and all of that and deal with gangs once and for all. You want to then have a drug unit that will be able to then target drugs around our communities. You want to have a specialized GBV unit. Go to police stations right now, Thabo. You're supposed to have victim empowerment centers. That now most of them are not operational. Yeah. In certain police stations, I get a shock of my life when I arrive there.
So we don't have victim empowerment centers?
Not in all the stations. Not all the stations. I can tell you right now, I can take you to a number of police stations where you will walk in there, the centers are not there. In fact, women who are raped, women who are victimized, feel victimized twice when they arrive into the centers. And this is something that needs to now be addressed. As I was saying to you, you arrive in some of these centers, you are told, no, come tomorrow or come, or past the weekend, because there's not anybody, the people who are specialized to then deal with this kind of issues are not, on duty. And that cannot continue to happen. You also need an infrastructure unit. There's a destruction of our infrastructure across the province. People are now vandalizing, stealing our infrastructure. There's actually now like we had the construction mafia, we now also have a water syndicate. People that are benefiting through the water tankers, who are now deliberately damaging our water infrastructure. You get, just here in Johannesburg just the other day, valves that are closed, chopped. Why? Because somebody is actually then benefiting from then using of, the water tankers. Now, you need to ensure that you're able to then deal with it as a unit. You also need to then have a specialized corruption unit. Now, I hear Funzi saying that we need to have courts. You can have courts, but if you're not able to then do proper investigation, the courts are not going to be able to serve you, because courts come at the end. Courts only deal with dockets that are presented in front of them with evidence, and that's how they deal with it. You need, before you get to the courts, you need to be able to then deal, with proper investigation, with arrests, and then you're able to then build up your cases and successfully get people off the streets. Yeah. That's what we need to then do in Gauteng, and this is what we're proposing to the people of Gauteng.
Okay, now a question coming through from our listeners, 072-110-5584 for all our candidates this evening on the floor. Good evening, Thapelo. Gauteng is the economic hub of South Africa. It can't afford premierial chairs or unstable coalitions like in local government. Assuming feasibility, are your guests willing to work together and other parties so that we may have a stable government? If not, how can we have a stable coalition government in Gauteng? Let's talk to you, Margaret, because you're a speaker of a coalition that's somewhat, in most instances, quite unstable. And it could prove problematic if that situation is translated into province.
I think I wanted to speak on the crime, but I'll speak on this one first. I think in Gauteng, if I speak about the city of Johannesburg, I think we are stable right now, Funzi. We are very stable currently. Unless some
until
people,
Funzi comes with
until Funzi comes. But we are quite stable, and I think as the AIC, together with other political parties, we would have had a very stable government if everybody listened to the smaller parties. Yeah. When we started off with this, Solly didn't want to listen to us.
They call you mercenaries.
Solly didn't want to listen to us. Neither did Funzi want to listen to us. You know, we had to talk to people that did not talk to each other. And we eventually got them to talk to each other. And thus, we had a rocky start, but it went well. It's going quite well now. It's becoming very stable. But my fear is, come the elections now, what is going to happen? You can't have a president for 2 weeks and or a premier for 2 weeks like you have in local government. So people, we need to think as parties what is good for the electorate and not what is good for us. And forget about the politics, but think about the people, because otherwise it's going to kill the country. Yeah. It's honestly going to kill the country. Yeah. But as the AIC, we are prepared to work with anybody that believes in working for the people and not working for themselves.
Right.
Funzi, that's what we would want to see.
You're in a coalition that recently I saw your president saying, what is this guy talking about? He says, can't compete with us, stay in the Western Cape. You must fight the ANC, go everywhere else. This is, people are looking at this saying, these guys are in a coalition, they're going to fight at province on who must run which province and occupy which seat.
Yeah, and I think for us, we are asking South Africans to give us the full mandate. The multi-party charter is something that we have signed on, and in the event that we don't get a full mandate, then we will work with the parties that we have identified, that have come forward, that says, you know, our values mostly are aligned. There are areas we differ at, but we think that in most cases we align. We are aligned when it comes to how we must deal with the rule of law. You know, we are aligned when it comes to eradicating corruption. We are aligned when it comes to prioritizing our people and our South Africans. So those are the basics that we must agree on. The rest, you know, I think, you know, it takes maturity from political parties to be able, like Margaret was saying, to respect every partner who is in the coalition. I'm not so sure why she says we were fighting, because from our end we were saying all parties, you know, whether you've got 1 vote or 2 votes, we must respect you. And because you are valued and you contribute to the running of government. So to us, it's going to be possible to do so, but we are asking South Africans in the main to say, give us the full mandate, particularly in this province, so that we can be able to execute our policies without any disorder. But in the event that the voter says, I want you guys to work together. We are ready to do so. We have got an experience of leading a coalition that was stable. Myself and President Mashaba, we ran a stable coalition between 2016 and 2019. It's unfortunate that it collapsed because there was a vote of a motion of no confidence that was coming, and the president resigned. But we think that we have learned our lessons, and we are the one that are always humbling ourselves and wanting to work with everyone. So we'll continue to do so, and we think we're going to have a stable one.
Still on coalitions, another question coming through on 072-110-5584. I'll put that to Thapelo. He seems to be in his party enjoying a good ride on a coalition ticket. Please ask the premier candidates if their parties will be willing to work with Jacob Zuma's MK party should there be a need for a coalition to be formed in the province. You are on a coalition ticket in the Johannesburg Metro. You yourself tasted it. It's with Thapelo now, but it seems to work for you as a small party.
Yeah, no, correct. It's sailing. We are sailing, rather. So I would like to demystify a notion that coalitions are not working. Coalitions are indeed working. It depends on what mechanisms do you put for the bureaucrats or the implementers of those services or the implementers of those particular policies or manifestos. Right. So you can even see that inherently a political office, it's a temporary office. Right. So in the city of Johannesburg, we've lost 3 mayors, but coalition was intact. Over and above that, the change of government in 2021, coalition, whether with the multi-party government was intact or not, it's a question that the voters would decide. Right. And when I came in, and my transition between me and Mayor Kabelo Kwamanda, it didn't disrupt any services. So in essence, the coalitions are working, and the mandate of the voters are saying, let us reduce the arrogance of bigger parties and test our democracy and see if small parties can participate. It's no longer a question of small parties. It's a question of new parties versus old parties. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we have demonstrated as Jama-ah. You can check the audits as well. They are clean under the stewardship of Mayor Kabelo Kwamanda. Okay. So for us as Jama-ah, so remember, in a coalition, each and every party needs one another. So there isn't a question of you have bigger seats or you have bigger votes than the other party, because in the absence of that, there can never be government. Okay. So if parties are aligned, for us as Jama-ah, we will work with the parties that are aligned to the policies of the left, right. the parties that will take a black child as a priority. Whether it be whether it be an MK, whether it be an MK, or you know.
Let's only 2 questions for you.
But that's the truth, because you can look at the track record. History doesn't have blank pages. There's an issue of 130 employees of the city of Johannesburg. We can use that as a case study. And my colleague here, Funzi Ngobeni, would know how did we fight for the 130 black children to be reinstated and senior officials of the city of Johannesburg. Yeah. So the notion of them saying we will go and purge the cadre deployees, or I don't understand what criteria would you use if a person is a qualified doctor? What criteria would you use to say you were deployed, therefore we are purging you? You know, so it's a question of us understanding that it's a war against the black child.
Solly, 2 questions. Your attitude as the Democratic Alliance towards small parties and coalitions, 1. 2, the MK party. Would you be willing to go in a coalition with the MK party?
Well, talking about coalitions, we're the only political party that has already submitted the bills to Parliament to then try and concretize how you deal with issues of coalitions then going forward. Because if you look at, the South African democratic system, it's inevitable. We are going to land up in coalitions. It's like what you have in Scandinavian countries. It's like what you have in Germany, what you have in Switzerland, what we have in Denmark. It's this kind of system that is going to lead us to having that kind of setup.
But somebody said it's easier in those countries because you have 2 parties. Here you've got 200.
No,
but independence.
Yes, this is why we're also now looking at what you need to then do Are you able to then introduce a threshold as one of those examples? Are you able to then introduce an ombud that looks in terms of how you then deal with disagreements whenever they would arise? So you would have somebody who, something like a CCMA, if you like. Can you limit the number of motions, to one a year, whatever the case may be? But here's something that, the Democratic Alliance had foresight of now. We said 2 years ago, John Steenhuisen said we needed to ensure that in South Africa we're able to then start saying what is in the best interest of the South African people. What does South Africa look like post the ANC? You start there and say, what does the economy look like? What does education look like? What does health look like? What does social development look like? Infrastructure look like? And then you then say, how do we then get there? Before you get to the who. So you've answered the what, you've answered the how, and then you get to the who. Because what we have learned since 2016 is that you had parties that are coming together and only want to coalesce around positions, not around what they want to then deliver. And this is something that we have learned and we've said. And we've stuck to our principles. We've been blamed for it, but we've stuck to our principles. We don't want to be in coalitions that are unstable. And this is why when ActionSA approached us to then say we want to bring in another party or other parties back into the coalitions, we said no. It is because we are saying our principles that if you are here, you need to make sure that you remain the term and you become part of, delivering solutions to the problems that are there. Not, jumping from one area to another because of positions. Now,
I want to play the question is, you're very clear about the EFF being not part of you at any point. MK Party?
Well, there's a number of positions that we put forward. One is that if you're not open for an open market system, then we cannot engage with you. If you cannot, eradicate or work with us in eradicating of corruption, we cannot work with you. If you cannot then ensure that infrastructure and service delivery takes priority, we cannot work with you. So this is why we're not even talking about characters. We're talking about the things that we will not agree to or that will be non-starters for us. If you agree to those things, then maybe we might be able to then talk to you. If you don't agree to those things, unfortunately, we cannot talk to you.
Let's take a break. The premier candidates for the Gauteng province staying with us. Solly Msimanga, Margaret, Arnold, Funzi, Ngobeni, Jama-ah, still with us, Thapelo Ahmed. All right, we'll talk crime next. Give Margaret an opportunity to do that. Then we'll talk housing, because Funzi wants to talk about housing, and then we'll wrap up the conversation. But keep your WhatsApp messages coming, 072-110-5584. Back live with you tonight here on In Focus. I wish I could have just kept the cameras rolling and people would have seen the conversation that was going on while we were at the break. Solly Msimanga, Margaret, Arnold, Funzi, Ngobeni, and Thapelo, Arnold. But let's take your WhatsApp messages. 072-110-5584. I'll come back with this and what the people want to talk about. The biggest contributor to corruption in South Africa is the tendering system. I'm disappointed not to hear anyone mention the fact that they want to reduce or do away completely with tenders. Margaret?
Do you want me to respond on the tenders, or can I respond on the crime?
You can respond on the tenders, then go to the crime.
Well, I think as the AIC, we've never been involved in any tendering, so we stay clear from there. But I think, yes, tenders bring a lot of problems. So tenders have actually brought...
In the Gauteng province, the e-government system, which seemingly is doing well. It has an unqualified audit with no findings. It's in the green, which means there's not much that the Auditor General would have found that is a problem.
I'm not sure why the MP next to me is laughing about it, but because I'm not an MP and I wouldn't know much about that. But I think as the AIC, we've looked and we've seen that tenders causes a lot of problems. And I think the person that has sent that WhatsApp message is quite right, that we need to look at dealing with tenders and how to deal with it. Is maybe get rid of it and just get our contractors to do things. Because
how do you get rid of them when you want set aside, when you want the province to spend a particular portion of money to inject into businesses and help small businesses?
Well, there should definitely be another way of doing it, because the way that it's being done right now, it's where the corruption comes in. It's where all, anything happens and people empower themselves rather than empowering the businesses. Because I think, Funzi, half of it goes to their own pockets rather than going to, and they get kickbacks out of these tenders. So I believe that there needs to be a different way in doing that. And as the AIC, we would still go towards looking at how to do that. Currently, we have not thought about the tender system as yet, I must be honest, but there should be a different way of doing it. Because I can see my neighbor on the other side is definitely
Speaking of
telling us how to deal with it.
Kickbacks and corruption and crime, you shake your head very strongly when he says, I'm going to establish 5 units, a gang one, a drug one, infrastructure one, corruption, I forget the other one. But why are you shaking your head?
I was shaking my head because I think... the gang unit has not worked. It definitely has not worked. We've seen it. We've seen the anti-gang not working. The anti-gang sits in those vans of theirs the entire day doing nothing and just, they just exist. They are just there and they've done nothing. We've been told about 200 police that will be deployed to all the different areas. Nothing has happened. I must agree with Solly that going into a police station after GBV, after a rape, you go to secondary trauma. I've been there. It's an open secret. Everybody knows that I'm a survivor of rape. And going into that police station and they tell you, but why have you been in the street? Or they even ask you when you say that my husband has raped me. It's your husband. How can you report your husband? And those are things that the police should be looking at, The issue of drugs. Drugs is walking in our streets. Nobody does anything about it. Not even the police is able to deal with it. And anti-gang was really put out there to deal with the drugs and to deal with the guns. They are not dealing with it. Westbury has cordoned off themselves today. As I'm speaking, they've cordoned off themselves today. There was no entry and no exit out of Westbury. Whose fault is it? It's the fault of the police, because they are not doing what they are supposed to be doing. Local government needs to get their own courts, because the courts out there, I think somebody spoke about the NPA not being too clean.
Corruption courts.
And it's definitely, the NPA is not as clean. Dockets disappear all the time, Funzi. We've seen it. One of your activists or one of your leaders is part of the Yes movement within El Dorado Park, and I'm sure you know about what goes on within. So for us as the AIC, I don't think we can go back and redo what was there, but we need to find different ways of doing and dealing with the police. Maybe we should be able to have our local government courts, deal with give the JMPD more teeth than what they have, because currently they have no teeth, and they are always first on the scene of any crime scene. They are first on the scene. Look at what you do with neighborhood watches. Look at how much teeth you can give the CPF, rather than taking people to camps with soldiers. Obviously, they will not be able to deal with crime because the soldiers are skopskit and donor, and that is it. And how can you let people enforce the law?
Quick 2 minutes, Solly. You wanted to weigh in on the tender, then I'll come to Funzi.
Well, Thabo, we need to understand the animal that is government. There are certain things that government don't have to do every day. That's why you would end up having a tender. And you now need to then go beyond the middlemen, if you like, because that is what is building a lot of fat. That the middlemen, that's where you're having a lot of fat. And this, initially, if you go into the history of where we're coming from since 1994, and when the introduction of the BEE came in, and then people were benefiting out of that, we were not really building industrialists who were able to then produce. What we did is we got people who were able to then go to the wholesaler and say, if you give me this, how much will you charge me? And then they will add on a fee on that and then give that to the government. Yeah. Now, that is not something that we should have sustained. What we needed to do is to make sure that we we bring in industrialists, people who are able to then produce, so that even beyond working for government, they will still be able to then, continue with their products and be able to then run sustainable businesses. So that is one thing aside. The second thing is that we've been calling for an open tender system. Now, you're talking about the Gauteng e-government. Yeah. These things are cooked before they even get to be loaded onto the system. So the department has got so much money. You go and say to your supplier, this is how I want you to then come in. Already it's loaded like that on the system. So by the time you get to the system checks out okay, because it is already predetermined, it's already preloaded. Now, this is why we are saying, you need to then say, how much am I willing to pay for a product? I am not willing to pay beyond this. And if you want to come in, you need to then cap it at somewhere. And you don't cap it according to how much you have. You cap it to what it is actually costing out there in the market. Okay. If you're able to then do that, you will be able to then identify people that are producers. You will then be able to then go and get the best value. And this is why you will then cut middlemen. You'll be able to then save so much money, throughout the process. Yeah. And that's how you'll also be able to then root out corruption, because then, you don't have people who are saying, well, I know that this department has so much money. This is how much they're willing to pay, or this is how much they're willing to spend in a product. Yeah. But then you're able to then go and say, how much does this bottle of water cost out there?
At the market. Yeah.
And then you're able to work your way there.
I'm pressed for time. Let me give you this question directly to you, coming from one of our viewers, 072-110-5584 on WhatsApp. I would like to ask Solly, what is the position of the DA when it comes to giving access to well-functioning municipalities a chance to build houses directly without having to wait for the province? Is it possible? Is it feasible?
Well, yes, I think it is something that we can then look at. If municipalities are able to then do it, you should be able to then allow municipalities to do it. Give you a number of facts. Gauteng is sitting on 1.23 million backlog right now. At its best, Gauteng is able to build only about 35,000 units a year. At its best. And they haven't been able to do it for a while. And this is why one of the things that we had proposed, and by the way, it was even shot by Panyaza Lusufi at the time, saying, no, we have apartheid thinking, we don't think that black people should be owning houses, blah, 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 blah. And we said, no. The reason why we're proposing what we were proposing back then is that we realized that you are not going to be able to then catch up with the housing backlog. We were saying, identify a land, ensure that you formalize services on that piece of land. You will avoid what you're having now. Municipalities are now drowning in debt because there's illegal connections of water, illegal connections of electricity. People are just grabbing land left, right, and center. If you then make sure that you formalize services on pieces of land, and make sure that every person that you're going to give a stand to has running water, has a flushing toilet, has electricity and a prepaid meter to it, and then a title deed to it. That's how you're able to then ensure that you address the backlog. Because people have proven time and time again, go to certain areas where people started off by invading land, end up building houses, beautiful houses in certain instances. And so we are saying, so there is the ability for people to do that. Allow the auditing of pieces of land. Make sure that you're able to then roll out formalizing of services in these pieces of land. This is what we proposed to Panyaza Lesufi, and then he told us exactly what
Mamuluku Kubai says would happen as part of the various tiers.
But that's what I said to you. When we raised this up in 2014 already, 10 years ago, I was in the legislature as a first-timer. I raised that in 2014. And I'm saying to you what Panyaza said to me. He said to me, I don't see black people owning houses. So I still come with apartheid mentality of thinking that black people should not own houses. And then now, 10 years, they start speaking about it as if it's the next best thing after sliced bread, while we have been saying it all along and they've been failing to implement it. And now when we're having a backlog that is now almost insurmountable, that's when they start jumping to it. When all the pieces of land that could have been used back then, you go to Extension 19 in Atteridgeville, you go to Tembisa, certain parts, you come here in Lenasia, you look at pieces of land that have now, been illegally occupied. And by the way, now, in certain instances, becomes even impossible, for you to be able to then remove people if you're not going to then give them alternative pieces of land. We talk about hostels as well. He's talking about, 6 hostels that they want to then be renovating. We have been saying for the very, very, very long time, let's ensure that, where you have hostels, you are able to then quickly convert them into family units. You are able to then identify which ones you want to keep as RDPs and which ones you want to keep as rental stock. You're able to then do that. You are able to then spend money and make sure that you hold people that are responsible for those projects to account. What we have seen time and time again, you go to Madala Hostel, you go to quite a number of hostels where they claim to have spent money. I'd say to you, go and see what is happening there. It is a shame that we are sitting 30 years down the line, we're still sitting with the same problems that we're seeing after spending hundreds of millions.
Let me bring you in here. It's a number of areas. One, it's the backlog, 1.2 million backlog. 2, it's the proliferation of informal settlements. 3, it's the urban, was it called the urban rapid land parcel distribution program that didn't quite work. How do you plan to put all these things together, including the question from our viewers to bring in private individuals to do it for themselves?
Yeah, I think the viewer is asking whether that can be done at the local level, and I fully agree that it needs to be devolved there. In fact, I think the province has given certain municipalities, the right to be able to build houses, but it needs to be given more powers to the local government to be able to develop houses. But I think I do agree that certain services is a solution. It's one of the solutions that needs to be used. One of the mechanisms of dealing with this backlog. The other thing that needs to be looked at is the hijacked buildings, and for us, we're looking at it as a great opportunity. A lot of our cities, not only the metros, Thabo, but you go to municipalities like Mohali City, you go to areas like Mfuleni and other places, you'll find a number of buildings that are there, which are still in good condition. They've been hijacked and are used for other reasons. So we need to reclaim those buildings and get people into affordable housing in those places, because then they'll be close to economic opportunities, and then they'll be able to get even their children to schools close by. But also one of the things that we must do, I think Solly spoke about 35,000 at their best when they. I mean, if you can look at that 35,000 and do an audit, you'll find that most of those houses are occupied by wrong people. Some have been sold fraudulently to foreigners and so forth and so forth. So we need to do an audit of the RDP houses that have been now given to our people, so that we can be able to be sure that it's only people that deserve to be in those houses that are in those houses. But also we need to do a full investigation into the mega project. There's a lot of money that have gone into this mega project, and a lot of them have been badly constructed. At the moment, as I was speaking to you, residents in those areas are complaining about various issues.
It sounds like ActionSA, for a huge part of your first part in administration, to be doing audits.
We have to
just
check
auditing everything.
What we are dealing with.
There's very little delivery, but a lot of audits.
We have to know what is happening. It's important that for you to be able to resolve the issues, you need to dig down and know exactly what is happening so that you can be able to come up with proper solutions. So we will be doing that. But and it's very important, Thabo, that we must be able to go deep into this mega project so that we can be able to learn from the mistakes that have happened there and continue to build more houses for our people. But most importantly, let's get people out of the far-flung places. Let's get them closer to economic opportunities as much as possible. Urban housing, so that they can be able to be closer to economic opportunities and be able to participate in the economy. But certain services, it's one of the important interventions. Yeah.
Thapelo Ahmed, and I suppose the question for all of you as we wrap up, because I'm completely out of time. What are you going to do with the e-tolls? Give me your one big idea.
The e-tolls?
Yeah.
They need to be completely scrapped.
How are you going to pay for them? Because yes, you can scrap them, but you still need to pay.
Yeah, we still need to pay. We will have to raise money through levies. The government is currently doing that. This is why we're finding exorbitant amounts of petrol hikes, other levies. So I think we need to be sympathetic. We need to revisit on how do we increase those levies. But however, in essence, e-tolls are an apartheid structure. You know, when you enter the boom gate, you're not allowed to, if you go to areas where there's apartheid, you'll be barred from entering certain things. So technically speaking, the e-toll, it's there to only oppress a black child, because if you look at it, it is at the peripheries. So if you're living in the south of Johannesburg, Region G, you're coming from Orange Farm, if you are driving, it limits your access to what my colleague has spoken to, the urban development participation, because you'll have to pay to go to Jozi. You understand? So also, directly or indirectly, if taxi drivers or the public transport has to pay for those e-tolls, of course the bus fare or taxi fare will also increase.
From what I know up until this point.
Yeah,
they're quite exempted from it. But okay.
They're quite exempted. But remember, there's also the economies. The colleague spoke about transport logistics to transport food, and those trucks are going to be charged. You understand? So the food prices are going to hike as well. Yeah. And if you are not employed, so it's going to be detrimental to the entire society. So I think we need to do away with them.
That's the big idea. Margaret, Arnold, what's your big idea with the e-tolls? What are you going to do with them?
I think that e-tolls can still be used for revenue, to bring in revenue, because even as a city of Johannesburg, we are struggling to get revenue in. So somehow it can still be used for revenue. A lot can be done with the e-tolls rather than just scrapping it, because you're going to scrap it and really, it could serve a good purpose in bringing in revenue in Gauteng.
Solly Msimanga?
Well, yeah, I have to disagree with Thapelo. People want to racialize everything. Everybody's affected by e-tolls. This is why it's a Gauteng-wide fight. It's not a township fight. It's everybody fighting against it. It's an unwanted system that everybody fights against. So when we want to racialize, certain things, I find a problem with that. Let me tell you two things. One is that the 31st of March that was promised during the State of the Province address, we will not see them being switched off, because now we have a who's fooling who playing itself out. You have Minister Godongwane saying that the Panyaza Lesufi must then tell us when these are going to be switched off and when there will be gazetting of, the switching thereof of the countries. You have Panyaza saying, no, the national minister must then tell us when this thing is going to happen. So there's no communication, there's no clarity in terms of what is supposed to happen. So come the 31st of March, we'll prove yet again that a lie has been told again, and the e-tolls are going to then remain. But here's what we say. We have been saying there's already infrastructure that is in existence. So use that, to crime fighting. A lot of cars that are stolen that are going up and down the highways. You can use that for number plate detection. You can able to then use that to then ensure that where there are actually even cash in transit, because some of them do happen on the highway, you're able to then zone in and know exactly where this is happening, between what exit and what exit. You're able to then close that space down as quickly as you possibly can, so you can then use that. I can tell you one thing. The DA will come in within the first 100 days, will lodge an intergovernmental dispute with national government, because this is something that is not wanted. We have said this is not a system that the people of Gauteng want, and we are not going to back down. And we are not going to be paying 12 billion rent, plus also now taking over the responsibility as a province of maintaining national roads. That is going to cost over 300 million, of maintenance on an ongoing basis. Where is that money going to come from? While National Treasury has already said to the provinces that you're not getting any new money. So that is what we are going to do. We are going to lodge an intergovernmental dispute. We are going to then say they must take this debt. They must see how they deal with this debt at a national level. They must then deal with the maintenance of it. If they are then saying to us, we will give you money, then you can be the custodians of it, sure, we can do that. But if it's money that is supposed to come within the province, well, they've already said that there's no new money coming in, then we are having a problem, because it means that we have to then take money away from other critical services that are supposed to be delivered at a provincial level to then maintain this provincial roads.
Funzi, what are you going to do?
I agree. It's not a provincial problem. It's a problem for national to deal with it. But Mr. Mashaba will be the president, so
it will be his problem.
It will be his problem. For us as a province, I fully agree. We don't have money to pay for that amount. I think people that came up with this also need to be held accountable at some point. People cannot get away with something that clearly from the word go it was wrong, but they insisted that they must go ahead with it. So I think that national needs to, Treasury in particular, needs to find ways of how they can be able to do that, and that will be a different government altogether. But even here at the province, Panyaza seems to have signed an agreement of some sort that he will pay 30% of that. He has not consulted with any of us. He has not consulted with the residents of Gauteng on whether we want to pay that 30% that he has signed on with National Treasury. So we will make sure that that goes away, and make sure that National takes the full responsibility of it. Whether they want to use it as a crime prevention system, that will be the national direction that we'll take from there.
Ladies and gentlemen, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming in. That's where we wrap up the Premier's debate this evening. Promise we'll do another one, looking at another province soon, but appreciate your weighing in and your engagements this evening. In Focus continues with what's making news next. Stay with us.